Hello. Today we transition from the days of Holly to the days of Hazel, and I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation and explain some of the interesting lore to do with the Celtic Mercury and how it corresponds with the hazel tree. So, first of all, for the Ogham Grove, the hazel. The days of Hazel go from the 3rd degree of Gemini to the 21st degree of Gemini. So it's the only tree that is completely Gemini. And so that's going to, when we think of Hazel in its star lore, it's all about Gemini. Now, Gemini is governed by Mercury. And so we're going to delve into Mercury a little bit. When we talk about star lore, most of the time we're looking at constellations and star patterns, asterisms, but it's also good to get a grasp on the planets and how the planets traditionally corresponded with the sun's ecliptic. That is, you know, like the sign of Taurus is governed by Venus, and sign of Aries governed by Mars, and Gemini governed by Mercury. And what do we mean by that? Now, traditionally, the traditional image for Gemini is the twins. Most people are familiar with Castor and Pollux, which are the Greek twins. But from the Roman Empire, that the British Isles and therefore the British Celts and the Welsh stories originated from Roman things, and the most prominent star lore Roman stuff in the British Isles was Mithraic lore. And there's two figures that turn up in most Mithraic star lore, and it's the twins. You know, they've got a proper name. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but basically they represent Gemini and the twins of Gemini. And that kind of fits in with the idea of Oak King and Holly King being a mortal king and an immortal king. Because even with Castor and Pollux, one is mortal and one is immortal. And if you like, you know, the twins are two, that dual nature. That's one aspect of the twins. But the other important thing with the twins is that at the end of Gemini, when the sun transitions from Gemini to Cancer the crab, that's the summer solstice. So it's the twins that lead us to the moment of the summer solstice, albeit for Hazel, it will only go to the 21st degree of Gemini, and then Apple is the last 9 degrees of Gemini and the first 9 degrees of Cancer. So here's another thing from Old Britain, really. This is from Hadrian's Wall. So this is in North Britain from the 4th century, the 300s. And it's a depiction of Mithras. But what's important is it's a star lore key of how things were understood in the ancient world. So if you look at this figure of Mithras, he's got the zodiac around him. And as you look at the picture, on the left-hand side, you can see he's holding up a sword. And the sword is right next to the Gemini twins there, you know, and the sword is actually pointing to the space between Gemini and Cancer the crab. That cusp between Gemini and Cancer is the summer solstice. So Mithras is actually pointing at summer solstice with his sword. But I want to draw your attention to how the planets corresponded with the zodiac signs. So above the figure's head is the moon and the sun for Cancer the crab and Leo the lion. And then after Leo the lion, there is Virgo. Now, both Virgo and Gemini are governed by Mercury. So Mercury takes you up to the moon and the sun and then Mercury comes back down from the sun. So that whole Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo is Mercury, Moon, Sun, Mercury. Now, it's really important to get a grasp on that, because according to the oldest writings, Julius Caesar, in his conquest of Gaul, he talked about the different gods and goddesses that the Celts believed in, but he only describes them from a Roman perspective. But he says their most important god was Mercury. So then for scholars studying history and archaeology, they're wondering, who is the Celtic Mercury? And so this is, I would say there's many candidates for the Celtic Mercury, but trying to get a grasp on the nature of Mercury is what we're doing now. So here's a bit of planetary stuff. Look, so look at this diagram. The top left-hand corner is the sphere of the sun, and the bottom shows Earth. And the part of Earth that's facing the sun is lit up in daylight. And the part of Earth facing away from the sun is at nighttime. Of course, Earth is spinning, so we get day and night all around the world. But the important thing is that Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, and Venus and Mercury are both on the daylight side of the Earth, if you like. That they were actually called paradromi, Venus and Mercury. Paradromi means runs with the sun. They belong to the light, you know, they're in the realm of light. They're not in the nighttime realm. You know, all of the other planets are. So once you go to the darker side of planet Earth, then you're in outer space where there's Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto and so on. But between the Earth and the sun, there is just Mercury and Venus, and they're in the realm of light. In many ways, they correspond with the Lord and Lady of the Fairy, you know, Oberon and Titania, those kind of ideas. And they resonate most in Earth at twilight, the realm between day and darkness. But you can see here how Mercury is so close to the sun. Now, it's the messenger of the gods, Mercury. But it's also a psychopomp. It leads souls to the next world and they die, something. Now, both Mercury and Venus can both be the morning star and the evening star, depending on where they are in their orbit. Most people think of the evening star or morning star as Venus, but it can equally be Mercury as well. They both run with the sun, and they can both be the light bringer in that way, you know. So Mercury is sometimes the light bringer and Venus is sometimes the light bringer, but they run with the sun. So they're very unique and very different to Mars and Jupiter and Saturn that are in deep space in the darkness, as it were, symbolically. So the Celtic Mercury that's favored most in Gaul is the god Lugus. And Lugus is often depicted with 3 faces. So this is a common depiction in ancient Romanized Gaul. Now, the reason Mercury has 3 as its numerical code is because the planet Mercury goes retrograde 3 times every year. Sometimes, once in a while, 4 times, but always 3 times. You know, there's always going to be 3 moments of Mercury retrograde each year. And if you're unlucky, 4. But 3 is the constant, if you like. So 3 became Mercury's number, just like 5 is Venus' number, because every 8 years, Venus does a 5-petaled orbit between the sun and the earth. So the planets have their frequency, they have their numbers, and Mercury is 3. And it gets quite interesting because Gemini is Mercury, and it's kind of masculine with the boy twins. And Virgo is Mercury, but it's feminine. So with Gemini, you kind of have a threefold masculine, and with Virgo, you have a threefold feminine. We'll get to that when we get to Virgo. So, of course, triple deities is very Celtic, and there is an attested triple aspected god or gods in Irish mythology. And sometimes, this is another one from Gaul, you get a Celtic deity like Cernunnos, but he's flanked by two others. So again, it's making a trinity. So for whatever reason, they're flanking Cernunnos with Apollo and Mercury, you know. Now there's only, Apollo is the sun and Mercury is Mercury, and there's only one place in the sun's ecliptic where the sun and Mercury are next to each other, and that's the cusp between Leo and Virgo. So Cernunnos is sitting there at that cereal harvest time cusp between Leo and Virgo, and he's handing out wheat. And it's quite an interesting thing. So again, looking at the hazel, and the hazel filling the days of Gemini, the hazelnuts tend to grow in threes. Not always. Sometimes you get one on its own, sometimes a couple, sometimes four, you know, but it's very, very common that it grows in clumps of threes, and this wouldn't have been missed by ancient people. So here's a few photos. Look, there's three there, three there, three there. So it's almost like hazel is carrying that trinity, that triplicity, not all the time, but most of the time. The hazelnuts grow in threes. So looks like, from my perspective, one of the figures is covered over with pictures, but this is a drawing I did of three gods from Ireland that are known as, and I'm going to pronounce it badly, they're known as the Tri-eochair, the three gods of Dana, or the three skilled ones of Dana, the goddess Danu. And they are Lu, here is the young man carrying a spear. Ogma is the man in the middle carrying a club. And Dagda is the old father figure, the good god, Dagda. And these three work as a trio. So they're like a triple aspected male divinity, or three aspects of one sort of thing. Now, I got to pondering this and how it would fit into a year wheel. So all I simply did is, from winter solstice, I counted 4 months and gave that to Lu, and then another 4 months and gave that to Ogma, and another 4 and gave that to Dagda. Not months, sorry, zodiac signs. So winter solstice for Lu is Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. That's the first section. And the only reason I did that, it's not to create a dogma, it's just experimenting with Mercury. So what I was hypothetically thinking was that any Mercury retrograde that happened from the winter solstice to Beltane is going to be Lu having a retrograde moment. That was my kind of thinking. And any retrograde motion from Beltane to the autumn equinox is Ogma having a retrograde moment. And then equally, any retrograde moment from autumn equinox to winter solstice is the Dagda having a retrograde moment, or trickster wizards, or however you want to play with comprehending Mercury, you know. But it was just an interesting way of mapping out the year that could observe each of the 3 Mercury retrograde motions. So that's all I was thinking originally. Here's a close-up of now. So on the left, you can see we go into the days of Hazel on the 3rd degree of Gemini. And that means, hypothetically, we're in the 3rd of the year that belongs to Ogma. Interestingly, Ogma is a Hercules figure, which wears a lion skin. Ogmius is, and here's Leo the lion in his part of the year. But what's unique then with this middle part, this Ogma phase of Mercury, is that it is Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, or you can think of it as Mercury, Moon, Sun, Mercury. All of the other planetary influences are gone. They're gone until we get to Libra and we're back into Venus, you know. So right now, symbolically, we're very close to the sun, very close to the realm of light, where it's literally just Mercury, sun and moon, Mercury. I don't know how to make any more sense of that, but it's just me feeling towards what was meant by saying the most important god to the Celts was Mercury. I'm still trying to figure things out, but it's just a way of looking at things. So even this drawing that I did for my dad's book, it's a drawing of Ogma. But even way back when I did this, I was thinking of that Trinity. So on either side of him, there's an Ogham inscription around the door frame. So on the left-hand side, it says Lu, and on the right-hand side, it says Dagda. So although it's just a picture of Ogma, it is Lu, Ogma, Dagda. And even in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see 3 hazelnuts together. You know, so I've been playing with these ideas for a while. However, a new deity has come to light. And he's quite beautiful and quite amazing and very unique to this Acma. So although Ogma will remain important and Lu or Lugus as a Celtic Mercury, here we have another very unusual, obscure god from Ireland, which is another candidate for the Celtic Mercury. So knowledge of him comes from the Yellow Book of Lacan, which dates to the 14th century, end of. And the Yellow Book is full of lots of manuscripts. It's a compilation of manuscripts from different periods of time, sort of thing, that were all compiled at the end of the 14th century. Now, one story in there is called the settling of the manor of Tara. Okay, Tara is the famous hill in the county of Meath in Ireland, where the High King of Ireland was inaugurated as king. He had to literally marry the goddess of the land. And at Tara, she was known as Maeve, spelled M-E-D-B, Maeve. And her name means the drink made of honey, the alcohol, mead, mead. And it implies she who intoxicates, you know, she's the honey goddess, if you like. So the King of Ireland has to marry her to be High King of Ireland. And that all happens here. Now, in the Yellow Book, there's a story from about 600 AD that tells of the nobles of Ireland gathering with the High King at Tara, and they're having a debate about how to separate Ireland into different areas and so on, how to divide the land. And they call for the oldest, wisest person to come and help them. And he tells them a strange story that he experienced centuries beforehand. And I'm going to do a YouTube clip that explains it in more detail. So I'm just going to cut it short here to read a bit out and get into the medicine. But at the end, when we've done that apple, I'm going to do an overview of the second Akma, and I'll go into this deity in more detail. But here's his name, and I don't know how you pronounce it. It's something like Trefuilngid Tre-eochair. No idea. It's Old Irish. Probably half those letters are silent. I haven't got a clue how to pronounce it. In English, apparently it translates as the triple bearer of the triple keys. Make of that what you will, So anyway, this deity appears, and he's huge. He's taller than the forests. And it's his job to make sure the sun goes down at sunset and to make sure the sun comes up at sunrise. That's his job as a divinity. So he basically walks back and forth between west and east, sunset and sunrise, and that's his domain. Symbolically, he's a light bringer, just like Mercury and Venus. So he brings the morning sunrise. And sometimes he's the falling star in the evening. Mercury is that. And again, that emphasis of the number 3, triple bearer of the triple keys, is this character's name. But I'm going to read a description of him from the Yellow Book of Lacan. Okay, so this is how he's described when they first see him. He was as high as a wood was, the top of his shoulders. The sky and the sun were visible between his legs. He was so tall. By reason of his size and comeliness, a shining crystal veil about him, like unto a raiment of precious linen. Sandals upon his feet. And, well, what was that saying? And it is not known of what material they were. Golden yellow hair upon him, falling in curls to the level of his thighs. So golden curls all the way down to his thighs. Stone tablets in his right hand. And these are, and a branch with 3 fruits in his right hand. And these are the 3 fruits which were on it: hazelnuts, apple, and acorns. In May time, and unripe was each fruit. Now, just going over this branch that he's holding, this weird branch. On the one branch, it has hazelnuts, apples, and acorns. Now, all 3 of those trees are in the second Akma, the oak, the hazel, and the apple. And the hazel and apple are next to each other. So his bough that he is holding corresponds entirely with the second Akma. More than that, he's doing this sunset sunrise thing, which is corresponding with spring equinox and autumn equinox, and equal sunrise on those days. So that due east, due west, due east, due west. The second Akma begins after the ash tree at spring equinox, and it takes us up to the summer solstice with the apple tree. So again, he's this mercurial figure who is called the triple bearer of the triple keys. He brings the sun at sunrise, and he has a branch that has acorns, hazels, and apples, all 3 of which are in the second Akma. So that's fascinating. There's a lot there to think about. Here's the second Akma on the left. So ash, the horizontal line, is the sunrise line, spring equinox, sunrise, due east. And then the second Akma is the blossoming the hawthorn, oak, holly, hazel, apple, but it's the blossoming time. It's not the fruiting time. Fruiting time is the third acma. Now listen again to the last bit. And these are the three fruits which were on the branch: hazelnuts, apple, and acorns. In May time, that's Beltane, in May time, and unripe was each fruit. The fruits are not yet ripe. It's May time, the fruits are not yet ripe. We're not in the fruiting time. Isn't that amazing? You know, I've only been aware of this character and for the last 12 months, but he corresponds with Hazel, Mercury, and the second acma so amazingly. You know, up until now, I'd just penciled in Ogma, but just because he's a mercurial tree wizard or whatever, you know. But I'm now thinking that as much as Bridie is the figurehead for the first acma with Imbolc, that this mercurial Celtic Mercury deity is the figurehead for the second acma. And he's kind of like overseeing sovereignty and the marriage between a would-be king and the goddess of the land. That's what he does at Tara. He advises them, and then from his branch with the different fruits, they then plant sacred trees throughout Ireland. You know, so he's all about helping the people and the king marry the land and be in harmony with the spirits of the land. You know, a wonderful thing, but it emphasizes what the second acma is all about. And then, you know, of course, it will conclude with the summer queen at Apple, you know, which is the goddess in Ireland called Anya. You know, she's the summer queen goddess, so goddess of apples. Anyway, enough of that. So we're getting to the hazel medicine. So hazel itself, all parts of the hazel tree are astringent: the bark, the leaves, and the catkins. And quite wonderfully, the herbalist Nicholas Culpeper in the 1600s, 17th century, he says hazel is under the dominion of Mercury. So it was perfectly in keeping with everything. What's that thing? Generally speaking, the parts of the hazel are wound healing, fever fighting, and blood purifying. Now you can make a tea out of the catkins, which is good for colds and flus. And you can also make a tea, but don't drink it. So you can make a tea of hazel leaf and hazel bark. And I say it wouldn't be harmful to drink it, but you use it externally, topically on the skin. And on the skin, hazel tea soothes the pain of the varicose veins on the legs. It relieves itching. It can help with hemorrhoids and burns and dermatitis in general. So externally, the hazel tea is a really good thing for the skin. The nuts themselves, I know from other studies that when there was bad harvests and in the Iron Age and older, there were times when they didn't have enough grain to survive. So, you know, grain was the main carbohydrate making bread. And when there wasn't enough grain, the Celts of the British Isles managed to survive on hazelnuts. Hazelnuts were the fallback carbohydrate, if you like, although they're a protein more than a carb. But if for whatever reason there was poor harvest with grain, you could get by with the hazelnuts. The nuts are rich in potassium and omega-3, phosphorus, magnesium, copper, all sorts of proteins and healthy fats. It's an antioxidant. It protects against cellular damage, lowers cholesterol, improves blood sugar levels, and improves sperm count. But I don't know if you were with the Ash video, we talked about spermageddon, and that male fertility is in decline. So hazelnuts is one of the few things that can increase the sperm count. The only fungus that I could find corresponding with the hazel tree, and it's not unique to the hazel tree, but it favors it, they get on very well, is a truffle called summer truffles, also known, I think, in France as Burgundy truffle, the summer truffle. Quite a powerhouse, lowers cholesterol, controls blood sugar levels, protects the liver, it's anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and can help prevent cancer. And here's an interesting thing. They get on so well with hazels that some garden centres now, and you can buy them from specialists, you can buy hazel truffle trees, where it's a normal hazel tree, but it's been inoculated with the spores of the summer truffle. So you buy the hazel tree knowing that you're going to get hazelnuts and the summer truffles as well, you know, so it's a 2-in-1 kind of thing. Quite amazing, especially as it's great medicine. 2 plants I chose for this time of year. Borage was the first. This one was growing in our garden, this one, quite beautiful. The flowers and the leaves are edible. And it's good for fevers and colds, depression. So it's a natural cheer-upper. It's blood purifying, sedative, and it's also been known to help reduce the symptoms of asthma. So people struggling with asthma get some relief from borage. That's a good thing. And the second plant I chose, I took this photograph yesterday, and this is Cleavers. It's that wonderful, I'm not going to say weed, it's that wonderful wildflower that clings to you. And it's like Velcro, you can throw it at your friends and it sticks to their clothing. But the Cleavers, every part of it is edible. It's completely edible. People usually juice it because it's a bit fibrous, but you can put it in a soup. You can just chew it or make a tea with it. It's very, very high in vitamin C. Medicinally, it's known as a cooling diuretic. So it removes water and lymph from the body through the urinary tract, you know, and it cools inflammation. So it has a very cooling nature to itself. It supports the immune system, and topically it can help again with psoriasis and eczema. So it's cooling on the skin, along with hazel leaf and bark tea and Cleavers. It would be good as an anti-itch that's going to heal psoriasis and eczema. So also as a cooling on the skin, it's good for skin ulcers like leg ulcers and burns, and it's even been known to help with acne and stuff. So it helps just to cleanse and cool and purify skin. So that's the end of my presentation, I think. Mainly I was wanting to just introduce you to, how do you say it? Trefuilngid Tre-eochair. I might just call him 3 keys or triple keys. I don't know. But you can put your mics on and talk about all of that.
3 keys I like.
3 keys.
Wow. I've been stripping some hazel here, Yuri.
Have you? Brilliant.
The whole time I've been stripping it, I was like, oh, I hope there's some medicinal benefit to the bark.
Well, there is.
Yay.
You have to save it all and go and drink it.
Don't drink it, though.
3rd degree of Gemini to the what degree of Gemini?
21st.
Yes.
So each tree has 18 degrees.
Wow.
just like, you know, the sun's ecliptic is just a circle, and the zodiac divides the circle into 12. So each zodiac sign has 30 degrees because a circle is 360. So it seems strange and subjective saying each tree has 18 degrees, but it's not. It's a circle of 360 degrees divided by 18 degrees gives you 20. You know, so the 20 trees each have 18 degrees. So you can divide the sun's ecliptic into 12 zodiac signs, or you can divide it into 20 Ogham trees. It's just equal divisions of the sun's path each year.
And we're at the second tree of the Acma, the second Acma.
The hazel,
Yes.
it's the fourth tree of the second.
Fourth tree of the second.
It's the ninth tree of the Ogham. Yeah. And in Irish law, there were 9 hazel trees of poetic wisdom above Connla's well, dropping acorns into the well. But there were 9 hazels, and hazel is the 9th tree in the Ogham as well. So it's interesting. And its emphasis is 3 because of Mercury. But three threes are 9. So it's all there, you know. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I got a planner at the beginning of this year that was based on the Mercury cycles, mostly after reading your book, Yuri, and yeah, it's a fantastic look into like it. You know, you plan your year with the Mercury cycles. I'll show you a quick image. It's been so helpful because it's like breaking up the year in. You see the 3 black lines.
Wow, are they the retrograde moments?
Yes.
Yeah.
So having the year kind of laid out like that, and that's all the dark moons, the black dots are the dark moons.
Right.
And it's really been very helpful for breaking up the year into bigger portions than just a month or a week, you know?
Yes.
We're on the black moon now.
And also the way the whole planet is kind of working is that in the retrograde periods, you're planning for that when it goes direct, like you would a dark moon to a new moon or whatever. And that's been really kind of potent as well, I've found. So it kind of makes sense as a way of I don't know. I can understand why Mercury works in this on these lands and stuff, basically.
With playing with Lou, Ogma, and Dagda, it's kind of looking at each Mercury retrograde as a different type or a different. I can't think of the right words, you know, but it's not all Mercury retrogrades are the same thing. One is spring and energy rising, one is in high summer, and the other is in the fall and the autumn and energy sinking. So there's the different aspects of Mercury in a trickster mode or something.
Archetype or impulse, great force, spirit.
Perfect.
What's the name of that book, Manu?
Andrew.
This to be honest, I did a really generic search, but it's called Cosmo Planner.
Cosmo Planner.
You're really on it, Yuri. It's like a mirror image of what you came up with there, Yuri.
Yeah, I don't know if they've been watching your channel.
Yeah.
The way I divided the year into 3 was just to give the first 4 zodiac signs to Lu and the next 4 to Ogma. But actually, that division corresponds with the Mithraic thing from Hadrian's Wall, where you've got the sun and the moon at the top and then Mercury on either side. You know, so like the first Mercury retrograde period is actually going from Saturn to Jupiter to Mars to Venus. So it's got those planetaries kind of coming out of Saturn into Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. That's it, coming into the light as Lu triumphant over darkness. And then Ogma is in the full light with Mercury, Sun, Moon, and Mercury. And then Dagda, the old god, is descending down through Venus, Libra, Mars, Jupiter, back into Saturn for rebirth at winter solstice. There's interesting patterns there. You know, not saying any of it is authentic Celtic. It's just,
But it makes sense.
yeah, it's just looking at star law and planetary ideas and stuff.
That's brilliant.
And, you know, it's relatively easy to predict a lunar cycle of full moons, but Mercury cycles are harder, requires more number crunching than your average person can do, you know. So just simply dividing the year into 3 and saying, oh, well, Mercury goes retrograde 3 times. So it just created 3 playing pitches for each retrograde motion. That was all.
Incredible.
What do you think about 3 keys and his magic branch with acorns, apples, and hazelnuts on it?
That's very neat.
Yeah.
I know Hazel is associated with enchanters, and so like a magic branch enchantment seems like a magic wand.
You slice an apple and get a pentagram sideways, and the acorn is the seeds of the new forest. So there's those 3 are they're interconnected.
Another story in the Yellow Book is about the 5 guardian trees of Ireland, and they're the offspring of this magic branch. There's a very strange and garbled story because the magic branch is acorns, hazels, and apples,
Which you don't.
but the 5 guardian trees are yew trees and ash trees, you know. So, but I suspect there's a lot of lore lost. You know, the Yellow Book is like a compilation. It's a scrapyard of stories.
That full title is the Yellow Book of
Lecan, Lecan.
Thank you. The settling of the manor
Of Tara. Yeah. And Tara's in the county of Meath. Yeah, it's the centre of Ireland. So the High King married the goddess of the land in the centre of the country.
The 5 trees bring to mind the 5 pregnant women who are survive in the cave after the apocalypse of Bran against mythology.
There's so much.
So with the second Acma, it's almost like Hawthorne begins it, and she's almost like the heart's desire that's going to inspire the young would-be king to prove himself. And then you get to Beltane, and there's that oak and holly kind of ding-dong to see who will win her. And then you get Hazel, which is this kind of wise mercurial divinity that is helping the people of Ireland manage their land and marry their king to the land. And then it concludes with Apple as the summer goddess, Apple Queen, on her throne. I think they're quite interesting. The first Acma seems to be about poetry, Bridget, and the cauldron of inspiration. And the second Acma is all about this sovereignty marriage with the land.
Is Gwydion associated with Hazel?
Yes, I think so. I think he might have a hazel rod for his magics.
And he calls up the plants and trees in the Battle of the Trees.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And Lou has the now they have the club, the spear, and the
Cauldron
carries the spear.
Yeah.
Lou carries the club. And the Dagda carries.
The Dagda carries a cauldron.
Yes.
He also has a very long club that is so big he has to drag it.
Yes.
Yeah, and as he drags it, it creates a furrow in the earth, so it's got a slightly sexual connotation of
Yes.
fertilizing Mother Earth or something, you know.
So does Huath have a slightly sexual connotation.
Yeah,
I found some writings on that, and the smell of it reminding of the woman's vulva, and that was bizarre. not had that smell.
And the staff of the dog, one tip brought death to the living and the other tip brought life to the dead.
yeah. And if you take,
a line measuring life.
yeah, if you go from the beginning of the Ogham to the end of the Ogham, it's birch beginnings and yew tree death, you know, so that's kind of Ogma's staff, life at one end, death at the other end. Sort of thing.
I'll take a stab at Trefuilngid Tre-eochair. That's how I pronounce it, Trefuilngid Tre-eochair. And he sounds like a nature god where, you know, when you're waiting for the dawn, you're waiting to get a glimpse of Mercury. And you just imagine that space that is twilight, that begins to fill the air. That is the embodiment of Trefuilngid Tre-eochair.
Yes.
That sounds right.
And in the story in the Yellow Book, the sun had been setting. So he's walking towards them from the sunset. And they say you could see the sun between his legs, you know, but he's so tall, he's as tall as the forest. Yeah. But quite amazing with this golden hair coming down to his thighs and this crystal linen shimmering clothing that he's wearing. Yeah, interesting.
A twilight god.
Yeah.
Because Mercury is, you know, so close to the sun. You're lucky to find it if you can see it, and he's only going to be there briefly, and it's always going to be in the haze of the twilight.
Say it again, Franklin, please, his name.
I pronounced it Trefuilngid Tre-eochair. Yuri has the spelling.
I have the spelling too now.
Oh yeah, I pronounced it Trefuilngid Tre-eochair just because it sounds like English.
In the White Goddess, Robert Graves considers him to be a Celtic Hermes Trismegistus. That's how he sees it, as this triple bearer of the three keys. For Robert Graves, it's like a Hermes Trismegistus.
Obviously, Hermes is Mercury, so
is it Mercury again, isn't it? You know, you could even relate him to Odin and Thoth. You know, they're all Mercury wizard gods to do with writing, and wisdom and learning and so on.
Yeah, there's this idea that well, it's all mythology, but you know that we were very much like animals, living like animals, very wild, unclothed, harvesting things, living in trees, and then something happens, you know, and all of a sudden we've got this neocortex that rises up, and we begin to do artwork and engineer things, and the whole, you know, societal evolution of humanity comes. And I think we can really associate that with Hermes Trismegistus bringing writing and poetry, abstract thinking.
Just as you were saying that, I was thinking about the sun and the moon being both sides of the mind, if you like, but then Mercury is the expression of that. It's the voice, isn't it? It's the word, the logos, or whatever, you know. So it's all going on in there. Yeah.
That really struck me in the image from the Hadrian's Wall of the Mithraic mysteries. Mercury was in the throat. I thought, wow, because generally we put a Taurus there, but here was Mercury in the throat. I think you just nailed it.
Yeah. And Venus in the heart. It's lovely. It's a lovely planetary chakra thing from Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah. A beautiful variation on the themes. You know, we want to hold these like water so that they can move around. We don't want to get fixated on mythology. We want to use mythology as a springboard to understanding, but always flexibly, interchangeably.
mercurial too, isn't it? It's fluid, it's liquid metal. It's
Yes.
yeah,
And reflecting the mind.
yeah.
I remember playing with it as a child. My father was a carpenter and he'd have the liquid, you know, that went into thermostats.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the Mad Hatters went crazy because they polished hats with mercury to make them shine. So I might have played with too much.
A little bit of it may be just what's necessary to lubricate the
Open.
mind, open to the other world, right? We get,
Thank you for that.
yeah, I think it's, you know, definitely. I mean, yeah, you can make the case that a stage of madness is somewhat necessary for real initiation.
Yeah. Talking of which, let's do the meditation. So if you turn the microphones off, I'll stop recording.